We didn't try to script this. We didn't try to tell them what it is they should talk about or suggest what kinds of questions that they ought to ask. We are also going to ask them each to introduce themselves, but I am going to turn over the microphone to our moderator, and everyone will introduce themselves, and then we'll begin the discussion. At various points throughout the discussion, the moderator will ask members of the audience if they have any questions or issues that they would like to hear from the students. We will also be taking questions from across the country as those are sent to us online, and we will provide those questions to the moderator as we go forward. So with that, Fez, it's all yours. Thank you.
Take it away. Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing today? Let's do it again. How's everyone doing today? There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Fez Zafar, and I'm a junior at Theodore Roosevelt High School in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm also the president of Sight for Smiles and Smarts, a national youth organization with the mission of empowering youth through education, healthcare, and political engagement. With over 40 chapters and representatives at universities and high schools across the country, we seek to enable youth to be the change that they want to see in all arenas of social justice and awareness. As there are students and teachers nationwide viewing this event online, I want to encourage you to join our movement and read more about our work at www.smilesandsmarts.org. I'll be serving as your moderator for today's panel, as we'll hear from students who have traveled from all across the nation to be with you today. It's no secret that we are in the middle of a critical election year. Whether you're liberal, conservative, or somewhere in between, a quick scan of this election cycle will reveal that so much is at stake. This year has witnessed an unprecedented movement of youth disrupting the political process. From gun control to climate change to mental health, we have seen students rising up and making themselves heard within their own communities, and you, the adults, deserve a round of applause for standing back and listening. Today, our live audience is comprised of superintendents, board members, and principals, but thousands of students are watching across the country, and I have this message for them. Your voice is important. Whether you are white, black, brown, gay, straight, male, female, or in between, no matter your religion, culture, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, background, political affiliation, or where you come from, you deserve to be heard. Today's panel is comprised of a group just as diverse in background as it is in thought. Each student represents a unique perspective on the issues that plague our nation and schools today. Throughout our discussion, I ask that our audience please consider the viewpoints that will be shared. As you return to your own communities, I encourage you to incorporate these ideas within your own schools. In doing so, I think that we can all work together to make our education system better and stronger. Before we begin, I'd like to give each panel participant an opportunity to introduce themselves to our audience. Mei-Ling.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
My name is Mei-Ling Hoshing, and I am a senior at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Shout out to Broward County, which is like right here in the front row. Hey. So as a student at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, it is no secret to what had happened February 14th. On that day, I was on the second floor of the freshman building, the same building that we lost 17 Eagles, where I hid in the corner with my classmates, and we lost 17 Eagles. But through this, we have seen a movement that has galvanized the whole entire nation and the world about gun control, mental health, and truly a youth-led movement. So yes, snaps. In the rise of this movement, I saw a lot of my classmates out there, and I was very proud of them. But I was also very angry, and that's simply because as an African-American woman, I understood the cadence of gun violence before February 14th. So I reached out to my school board, Dr. Osgood, hey, and I said, you know, where was this for Trayvon Martin? Where was this for Alton Sterling? My school is a predominantly white school, but you do not see my face on national television or the 40% of minorities that do attend Stoneman Douglas. So I will say that we are out here and we are fighting not only for mass shootings, school shootings, but also shootings that happen on a daily basis in Black and brown communities, which they have more trauma, deal with a lot of, they're actually numb by the trauma that they have endured all of their lives. So I'm here to speak on behalf of that, and I'm really excited to be on this panel. Thank you, Fez.
Hi, I'm Kay Galarza. I'm from New York City Department of Education, and I am here to basically speak about what it's like to be coming of age in a time where my identity has been politicized and problematized since before I've even entered the classroom. And the work that I do basically revolves around how New York City is one of the most diverse cities, but it is also one of the most segregated school systems in America. And that reality is something that I have to walk into every single day. So what I've done is I've worked with the DOE and NYU's Youth Technical Assistance Center for Addressing Disproportionality. We've conducted research, we've analyzed research, we've presented at Columbia University, NYU, we've presented recommendations, and I've also served on the Chancellor's Student Advisory Council, the Borough Student Advisory Council, and I work with Integrate NYC to make sure that this segregated school system, this system that was made to serve us, is failing us, and to make sure that that's remedied. Thank you.
Thank you, Fez, first off. Hello, my name is Vishal Crosby. I'm from the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. I am a student ambassador. I am a senior at the high school, wave mediator, and what my topic is going to be about is education equality. And a lot of times I see that our education and our educational systems and schools are not treating people fairly or with equality due to mental disabilities, race, religion, sex, gender. And I just want to express that and talk about that and how I have a standpoint on it, and hopefully it can help you change the way that you look at schools, how it can help your students change the way it looks at schools and all over the country.
Hello, my name is Esther Ubadigbo. I am a junior at Roosevelt High School in Des Moines, Iowa, and I was born in Des Moines. However, my parents are from Nigeria, and as a result, I emphasize embracing your background, whatever that may look like. I work with ScienceBound, and I am in ScienceBound, which is a STEM-focused program that works with Iowa State University. I've been in WISE, Women in Science and Engineering, and I've been a president of my Girl 2 Code group, and what I focus on is pushing the limits of what other people think you're capable of and doing what you love and what you advocate at all times, no matter what your limitations may be. I have an interest in a lot of current issues, and I express my views through art and poetry because I feel like those reach more people. So thank you for having me.
Hello everyone, my name is Nick Pazler and I'm a current senior at Cleveland High School in Portland, Oregon, representing the Portland Public School District. For the last 3 years, I've been heavily involved in my high school's student government and leadership. I was the president of our class of 2019 for 3 years. In 2016, I became one of the founders of Oregon Student Voice, a statewide organization that empowers and encourages students to speak out on behalf of their education and its quality. I have worked with the District of Portland Public Schools since 2016 as a sophomore, and this year was elected to be on the Board of Education. I use this, thank you. It's a truly great honor to be working with the Board of Education. I'm using this position to really elevate student voice to our district. We have a district serving about 50,000 children, and I'm working really hard with our district student council to bring more voice to the district and get the students to know more about what goes on at the district as well. I'm beyond thrilled to be here and to be representing Oregon and the West Coast.
Hi, my name is Lily Kwiatkowski, and I've had the great pleasure of attending the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine, where I've received an awesome education in Cleveland. And today, I'm here to talk about a lot of environmental issues. I was a founding member of the Environmental Heroes Research and Advocacy Program, and I've had a lot of opportunities to talk to congressmen, lobbyists, and also deal with now a landmark court case, which is going to be reaching the Supreme Court, hopefully. And I'll be talking a lot about that later on. I also have a lot of research experience in the medical laboratory, and I've contributed and have my voice heard through medical literature being published on 2 papers. So that was really another opportunity for me to contribute to a community. And then I'll be talking, and I'm excited to discuss all of these special topics with everyone here today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joshua Lynn. I am from Baltimore City Public School Systems. I currently attend Baltimore City College High School and IB School, and I am also on the Board of Education for Baltimore City Public Schools. I represent 80,000 plus students that attend Baltimore City Public Schools. My main thing here today is student advocacy. As being a part of the Board of Education and the only student on the board, I believe that student engagement and student involvement is necessary, and it is a necessity to have a working public school system that serves at the pleasure of the students. And so I'm here to talk about that. I'm also a member of the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, as well as the Maryland Association of Student Congress of Baltimore, Maryland Association of Student Councils, and I'm on the executive board for both of those. And I'm definitely here for student advocacy, voting registration, especially within the 18 to 24 age range, as well as other advocacy things that can involve students. I'm also a part of Ceasefire, as well as City Block, an organization that has hosted urban walkouts regarding gun violence as a follow-up to the Florida shootings. And so we have been engaged in student advocacy, and I continue to fight for student advocacy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Evelyn Reyes. I'm a junior at the John D. O'Brien in Boston, Massachusetts. I am honored to be representing the Boston Public Schools here today. I currently serve as the Boston Student Representative on the Boston School Committee. I work with the thank you. I work with the Boston Student Advisory Council as well as with Youth on Board, and I have also been a youth organizer for March for Our Lives Boston. I am here on behalf of my peers to amplify their voices and to make sure that they are heard.
Thank you, Evelyn. Ladies and gentlemen, the format of today's panel discussion will be as follows. As you can tell, each student has had experience in a certain topic of discourse. Each question will be directed to its corresponding expert, and others will have the opportunity to chime in. If needed, I may ask a few follow-up questions, and we will end with a Q&A with the audience, and we'll probably limit to 2 or 3 questions for each question that we ask. Let's begin. The Washington Post finds that voters aged 18 to 24 represent a third of our nation's electorate. But in the 2014 midterms, only 16% of this age group was said to have voted. In what Democrats and Republicans see as a critical election year, Vox finds that only 28% of this age group have pledged to vote, as compared to 74% of senior citizens. Why are students so disengaged from voting, and what can be done to increase their involvement? I'd like to direct this question to Nick.
Hi, thank you. So I'd have to start out by saying that I'm really appreciative to be here, and that I think all of us on the panel today, I think that we tend to represent a very small amount of students that are civically engaged. I mean, we all do a lot, and with our introductions, you can see that we're heavily involved in a lot of different topics. But the fact that only 16% of age group, or 16% of our age group said that they have voted, I think that has a lot to do with that students don't really see how their voice and their vote can make a difference. And the fact that, I mean, I just got my ballot 2 days ago in Oregon, which I'm really excited about, thanks to the 26th Amendment. So that was really good, and I'm really excited to be able to vote. But I think we need to get more voting organizations and more advocacy for voting in our schools. I can say for PPS, we've had a couple organizations come into our schools that come into lunch, come into different classrooms to talk about voting and advocate for it, and they actually do sign-ups at lunch in our schools. So I think we really need to try to increase that and have more discussions with entire schools. I mean, have assemblies with entire schools and really get students involved in certain issues, because we all come from different backgrounds, and I think the more students know how they can be connected to voting will help us in the long run.
If I could jump in, I think a main reason people today, especially young people, don't want to vote, there isn't a unifying issue across the board that's nonpartisan or bipartisan that students can relate to. I know when my mom was going to college, the Vietnam War was going on. Everybody who was in college at that time had friends or was being drafted, and they didn't want this war. They felt like there wasn't a reason to fight it. So that was a unifying issue to get out and vote. But today, there's many different and very non-bipartisan viewpoints on each side of every issue, especially gun control, climate change, huge things that are dealing with us today. So students don't feel that they have that unifying thing that brings them together, so they have the power as a force to go out and vote. And that's why I feel that today students don't vote.
Yeah, I would like to also to piggyback off of what Nick said earlier regarding students don't feel like they have a purpose of voting. Voting is a major thing, and we all should take the initiative to vote. But 18 through 24 age range does not believe that they have a voice. They do not believe that they are making a change. I will specifically speak for the African American community. We have sorry to be very blunt, but we have a system that does not work for the African American community. And so we do not feel that the need of voting is going to help the African American community. And for example, Maryland just recently, it's only been the early elections, but for the midterms, we have 106% of voting outcome, and that is within early voting already. And imagine the change that we can make during election day itself. And I believe that by making initiatives and by us changing that, then we can all come together. I'm working right now with the Associated Student Congress to do a party at the polls, and that initiative is that we would bring a party at the polls, and it would be a great party. And we believe that we believe that that'll bring more attention to the younger age range, and that could bring more attention, and that could register people to vote, and they can see how more voting can actually have fun about it. But yeah.
Okay, I would also, sorry. I would also like to go back to what Nick said. I think it's that educating young people on voting and what their power to vote really means is key. It's essential. Students need to understand, through civics education, right? Through civic engagement in their communities and in their schools, what it really means to vote and what your vote goes towards. And I think that specifically, so something that we've been fighting for in Boston and across Massachusetts really, is to get more civic engagement for young people within their own communities. And that's key. It's really, I can't stress it enough. It's key for students to understand how their engagement can impact their local politics and then politics on a bigger scale, right? So I want to go back to Nick's point again and say that I think it's also super important for young people to educate other young people on what it means to vote. Hearing it from one of your peers, I think, can be more impactful than maybe hearing it being said down to you from somebody else.
Yeah. And to piggyback off of what you just said, Evelyn, I feel like that starts in the classroom. If you're able, teachers, to start a discussion in the classroom and get other students talking, I feel like that would be a wonderful one. You're promoting positive discourse where people are sharing their views and they don't feel attacked, and then they feel like they can actually feel empowered, like Lily said, to go out into the world and to make a difference. And I think that is really what we need to be focused on.
And with more recent things like the 2016 election, there are allegations of collusion with Russia. So that makes people feel like, oh, my vote really doesn't matter now. It didn't matter before. Now, I guess it doesn't have any purpose at all. So that really does, I also think, have an impact. And then students don't have the experience that someone who's 60 or 70 has had to understand how far one vote can go to influencing their whole community and then eventually themselves because they live within that community.
Absolutely. Real quick, before we take questions, I was just going to say, what you guys were saying reminds me, I have a friend of mine who's actually a sophomore at Yale, and he posted on Twitter about how one of his professors said that anyone that goes and registers to vote gets extra credit. So if any of you guys are teachers and you're teaching seniors, because we love extra credit. Okay, so now we'll take, let's say, 2 questions from the audience. So if anybody has any. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your voices. Thank you for what you represent. Women have only had the vote for 98 years. We haven't even had 100 years of the 19th Amendment, which will be coming up for its 100th anniversary, obviously, in 2 years. Why aren't women more encouraged to vote, given that this is a privilege we just had? What excites young women?
I'm sorry, ma'am, there's a mic right there if you'd like.
Oh.
There's a, oh, okay.
Oh. I'll take that question. Yeah. Your question was what excites young women to vote? I feel like the same thing that excites everyone to vote. Like, I feel like things that directly relate to the things they're going through. I feel like in the media right now with the Me Too movement, a lot of times women's issues aren't taken seriously. I feel like that might put a damper on how effective they feel their voices. But I feel like it's important to emphasize that man or woman, or like however you identify, a vote counts as one vote, no matter what, even if you feel your issues aren't being represented fairly in the news and in the media.
I also think, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, I'm not sure if this quite answers your question, but I think one of the biggest reasons why young women, especially young women of color and young trans women, don't really feel the need or the ability to really have their vote count is because we look at who's in office and we see our president is someone who's been accused of sexual assault. He's still our president. Brett Kavanaugh has been accused of sexual assault. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford has gone out of her way to try and protect something that is so sacred in America, the highest court in our country, and he's still a Supreme Court justice. We see women in our entertainment industry go out of their way, sacrifice their careers, sacrifice the paycheck that they make to support themselves and their family that they worked hard for, and we see them get torn up by the media. We see them get torn up by their coworkers. We see students in our classrooms get torn up in there too. We see everything in our country and we think, or I think, man, our country really doesn't care about me. Oh, our country really does not care about young brown women, young black women, young women of color, young trans women. Our country really either doesn't see us or hears us but decides to silence us even further. And I have turned that into motivation to, I'm only 16, but for that 2020 election, I'm planning to vote.
Thank you. I'm glad that, and I hope all of you plan to vote. You are our next generation. Since we didn't get it quite right, okay, this generation, our generation, the one you talked about, we that are 60, 70, and 80 years old in this room, and there are some of us that 60, 70, and 80. So we didn't get it quite right because look where we are today. Look what Bishop, you just talked about. Kay, look what you just talked about. What do you plan to do? We did what we could do. We marched. Students lost their lives. They died. I marched. We went to jail. Kids died on my campus. What do you plan to do? We were college students that were asked by Martin Luther King to march. What leaders do you have that can guide you to tell you what to do? I'm the generation of the 40s, okay? So we had the leaders of Martin Luther King and the Jesse Jacksons that came to our campuses, the historical black colleges, and told us to go out and march. who do you all have? We will be gone soon. What do you plan to do to America and to the world, especially based on what Kay just told us, of what's happening with women's rights? How are you going to weather the storm? How are you going to handle the 2020 election?
Well, ma'am, you were just, so you're asking who do we see as our leaders now? I would say these are the leaders up here.
And what's your plan?
So I want to first, so this is something that a lot of people, especially your generation, says, like, we failed you. I'm not a part of that at all. You guys have paved the way for us. You guys taught us how to use our voices. So you did not fail us. I look up to the civil rights movement. I look up to the Me Too movement. I look up to all the movements that happened before me. And we do our research and we see that you guys as youth led your own movement. And the only thing is that it's our turn. So we look up to you. And I say that with all due respect because I respect you. We go out and we march. You see kids our age doing die-ins and out here like marching and protesting and really going up, past the social norm. But we're not dying. You guys have through this ultimate sacrifice, years and decades upon decades, and it has lowered now the actual sacrifice of when we protest and when we march. So I thank you, I really do, and I say that you are what inspires us. Yes. We look up to every single one of you that are in this room that are sitting in front of us right now, because the reason why you're here is because you believe in us.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And now we'll move to our third and final question for this question.
Thank you. So I heard some of you say in your entry that you are on your Board of Education or whatever your district calls it. How important is that to you, and do you recommend that for all boards of education to include students on the board?
I 150% recommend that all school boards have students on their board. It's been an amazing opportunity just in the 2 or 3 months that I've been on it. And we need to be at the table. That's why we're sitting here right now. Basing off of just the conversation we just had, we are learning experiences in our rigorous history classes every single day. We're being inspired by people that have come and gone in the world, and we want to bring that to our school boards and be there and have discussions. There's a lot of decisions that are made when we're all in school. Well, that's a good thing, we're all learning during the day, but there's decisions that are made that don't include us. And looking at this table, I think we have a lot of opinions up here, and we have a lot of good thoughts, and we have a lot of motivations. So I would say I really recommend it. Maybe even have more than one or have multiple people. So more minds, the better.
Yeah, definitely. This is my first year being on the Board of Education, as well, 2 or 3 months that I've been on. But I definitely believe that we should all bring students to the table. In the previous years, we've had older people make decisions for the youth, and I believe without the youth perspective, how are you making decisions for the youth? And one of the things that I've definitely been working on is that yes, I do have a seat at the table, and yes, I can speak on certain issues, but there are some issues that I may not be able to speak on. And this is where it comes in with the voting with student members of the boards. I don't know about Portland, but for Baltimore City Public Schools, I cannot vote on certain things on the board. And so one of the things that we really want to take into consideration is that if you really want to hear the student voices, and if you really want to hear what the students have to say, then you will give me the right to vote on certain matters that actually impact my school system. I think that, yes, I am as the board. Sometimes I just feel like a prop, honestly. But I am taking the initiative and talking with my board members and commissioners and even the ASCBC to talk about the initiative, to talk with our state senators, to make the change that student members of the Board of Education can vote on matters, and we are as well represented as other commissioners on the board.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to our next question. In the aftermath of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School shooting, our country witnessed an unprecedented wave of youth in favor of gun control. Known as March for Our Lives, this movement encompassed the nationwide efforts of students to bring gun control to the table as a topic of conversation. On the opposite side, a counter-movement in favor of more gun rights began to see similar traction, with both groups going head-to-head in the wake of the shooting. What kind of compromise can be reached to ensure that Second Amendment advocates are satisfied while maintaining safety within our schools? I'll go to Mei Ling.
Yes. Ooh, okay. Let's just say, first and foremost, I am not a part of March for Our Lives. That's simply because I take a different route in attacking this, which is more grassroots and more personal. I do not believe that you could attend state, stay there for 30 minutes and make a true impact. Yes, let's put that down. Second of all, yes, when we say gun control, people here take all your guns. When we say we need to really look at banning assault rifles, they say, look at all these kids. They don't know what they're talking about. But it's a shame how we get, counter protests when we just want to live. Yes. So how do we appease? I'm not a big fan of appeasing, okay? I apologize. There's this thing. I really don't, because this is a problem. This is how I explain it to people who just clearly just don't understand or are very ignorant to it. It's like you have a class of kindergartners, you give them a bunch of cool crayons, they take the crayons and they draw all over the desk. Then you see that your desks are messed up and they're all beat up and destroyed. So what do? You take the markers away. Or you say, you can only have these markers for a certain amount of time, and those are called marker controls. So, it's not like you let them continue using these markers. You see where I'm going with this? So when it comes to appeasing and making, finding the middle line, I strongly believe you do have a right to bear arm, for protection. But the thing is, if we were using guns for burglars and birds, we wouldn't have so much murders and homicide that is happening right now. That's not the case. So instead of shooting burglars, we're shooting each other. I'm not only talking about white on black, but also black on black, which is the elephant in the room, that we are shooting each other. And that's a problem. There's a lot of layers to this, but in order for it to work, we need to stop appeasing people, because we're trying to find the middle line. Oh, maybe we should just change the limit a little bit higher, when most of the shooters are not 18 and around the age of 18, 19. In our case, it was a former student that was 19 years old, but most shootings when it comes to mass shootings are the age of 30 to 40s. They're older, and they're still able to have assault rifles, and people are dying. We need to stop appeasing and start putting our foot down. It is time to vote, to say, listen, we will not have this anymore. The arguments are just arguments. They're just talk. If we are really going to be about this, and sadly, it hurts me to my core that I'm not 18, but if we are really about this, we can argue all we want, but the only way we win the argument is when we go and we vote on these decisions.
Yeah, I completely agree in that there is no compromising about the safety of children in schools. There is no compromise there. That should be our #1 priority, that these students focus on their education and getting farther in life, not having to fear about like, oh, where do I sit in the classroom so that I can be prepared just in case, you know? That shouldn't be a thought that children in school should be having. So I completely agree with that. And it's not about taking away the guns, it's about safety. It shouldn't be so easy to get a gun right now, and it is. It's ridiculously easy to just go out and buy a gun, and it shouldn't be because it's an extremely deadly weapon, and that needs to be fixed. So in my opinion, there's no compromise, and if both sides would just listen to each other, that we're not saying take away your guns, and that's just not the whole point of it. We respect the Second Amendment, and we think it's very important that people feel free, but at the same time, we need to protect our young people. So.
Absolutely. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Okay. Our next question. In a report published by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change on October 7th, the IPCC found that our world may see widespread impact as a result of climate change by 2040, sparked by wildfires, food rationing, and a destruction of underwater reefs and sea life. Though the panel of scientists stressed that a change in these effects is technically possible, such an impact is extremely unlikely due to the political indifference that we see worldwide. What can we as students do in our own communities to remediate the effects of climate change? And I'll direct this to Lily.
So as I mentioned before, I am involved in the Environmental Heroes program. We do research and advocacy. And the one thing I do find that students feel when it comes to environmental issues and any type of issues, oh, I can't vote, why should I care, what am I going to do that's going to help? But I am living proof that there are things you can do to help. There's advocacy, okay? So my program, the way we started our advocacy in 2015 is very simple. We started with local issues. We saw, oh, Strongsville, which is a city in Ohio, doesn't have enough green space. So let's contact the economic developer. Let's contact the congressman. Let's contact the mayor. Let's contact anybody that we can get our hands on, basically, and ask them what's happening, how can we get this to be on the ballot, and what can we do to try to improve this area. And then we went to one success we had in the beginning of our stages was the IKEA company was threatening to build over a Category 3 wetland. If you do not know what a wetland is, it is the area of biodiversity that takes about thousands of years to develop. And it acts as a bioretention pond. It also acts as a way for flooding to calm those issues down, and it's really an important area for biodiversity and life. So we were like, you can't build over this. This is going to cause huge issues. So we contacted IKEA, we contacted the Army Corps of Engineers, we contacted the mayor, we contacted everybody. We had people advocating on our behalf. We contacted the people who were giving these permits. And as a result, we were able to successfully contribute to stopping IKEA from building over that wetland. And this is all without voting. This is just our student voice. So from there, we were like, oh wow, we're pretty powerful. So let's go ahead, right, yeah. So let's go and let's do some stuff that's national, right? So we decided to get involved and talk to our congressmen, Rob Portman and Sherrod Brown, who are from Ohio, and they are in the National Senate. And we also talked to our local congresspeople and our local senators. And we heard from them. We had a private session with Stephanie House, who is a representative of Ohio. She told us what we can do, that she is listening, and the fact that if you contact her, she will come and she will talk to you. And she spent 6 hours with us out in the field. Sometimes you don't even get 30 minutes, and we got 6 hours. So, like, it's possible. If you're persuasive enough, if you're persistent enough, you can get things done. And then from there, we got involved with all these things. We talked to so many different people, Republicans, Independents, Democrats. We got the responses on what they believed in, and then we went to a conference, we presented it, and we showed how some Republicans will say one thing, and then later in another paragraph say another thing. And you can see how what they write is how they speak. And across the board, you can see what the differences are in the polarizing issues between Democrat and Republican that causes there to be very little bipartisan issues being passed today. And then from there, recently this year, we got involved with a landmark federal court case called Juliana versus the United States. If you've not heard of this court case, it is going to be heading to the 9th District Court in Portland, Oregon this Monday. They're going to be going towards trying to get their case closer to the Supreme Court. We're 2 big steps away, but we can get there. So what my group is doing, we recently became partner with the court case. We asked them, what can we do to help you? We are an environmental advocacy group just like you are. And and I forgot to mention, but the people who are in charge of this class action lawsuit are students who are ages 8 to 21. They're just like us, right? So they have had that impact already, and they are trying to get their voice heard. And they're basically suing, last year, well, before the 2016 election, they were suing Obama, but now they're suing Trump for not taking actions against climate change through our energy policies, because they are arguing for our Fourth Amendment right, the right to life, liberty, and property, and also part of our 14th Amendment right for due process in the law. And they're basically saying that you can have energy decisions that can protect our Earth. You can reduce CO2. We are at 406 parts per billion of CO2 already, and we need to get to 350 by 2100, or else this planet is going to deteriorate, and there's not going to be any place for any of us, not just humans, all animals to live. And that is a fact. I do not care if you don't believe in climate change. You can look it up. These are the facts, and you can't disagree with facts. So what we did is we got involved with them. We said, okay, we're going to advocate for you. We're going to talk to our congresspeople, tell them what you're doing. And this upcoming Monday, we are hosting a rally in Cleveland on the federal court steps downtown in Cleveland. We're going to be rallying and telling people what climate change is, what this court case is, what you can do to get involved, how you contact your legislators, how you make a difference, no matter what your age is. And we're doing this because we care and we want people to understand and know that they have a voice. And this is not just happening in Cleveland. This is happening across the country. In most of 50 states, there is a rally going on. And if you want to attend a rally, go to youthgov.org/October29 or go to ourchildrenstrust.org. And you can get details on the nearest rally to you. Go to this, support them, because this rally is happening in real time of the case, and you are supporting not just a local cause, but a national cause. And even though you may not be able to vote, you can still have your voice heard through the judicial now and the legislative process by contacting your senators and supporting court cases. So that is what I have to say about the environment, and yeah.
I think we just heard from a future president.
Yeah, to go off that, like this past summer, I did research at Iowa State, and we were researching plants and the cutin layer, which is part of the cuticle, and what it does, it protects plants from certain stresses, such as like sunlight, beams, like insects, things like that. And what we're trying to do is analyze what properties make up that cutin layer, so then we can test out the different genotypes and see what we need to do in the future, because we know that the climate is changing. So we know that there's going to be increased stresses on these plants, and we still need food, because there will still be people. So what I would encourage people to do, what I did was I developed this and I did this procedure. I was the first person to do this procedure at Iowa State, which was a lot of fun. But then I made my own poster, and then I got to present it to so many people, and the root of that is education. If you are in a position to learn about these things and educate people in your community about them, young or old, then you can make a change, and you can do what Lily did. And it's amazing when you hear the difference you can make, and when people just don't realize how big a deal this is. So, yeah.
Thank you. Before we move on to our next question, does the audience have any questions? I know we were all a little floored by...
Good afternoon. I have a question that I actually want to connect back to your very first question. So hopefully Lily and Bishop already know that I don't like playing by the rules. At home we call it changing the conditions. But it's, I really believe that, to the Audre Lorde quote, that we're not going to dismantle the master's house with the master's tools, right? So my question for you, the second and the third question, each of the panelists said, well, I can't vote, but. And your first question was how to get you to vote. Would you support changing the voter age to 17 so that you could vote while you were seniors, all of you, not just the ones that turned 18 before November?
Yes. Yes.
Actually, I was doing a little bit of research, and considering that I'm doing the Party at the Polls thing, me and along with the Associated Student Congress, we have been talking with Tacoma Park in Maryland, and we have been talking because they recently, well, not recently, but they've changed their voting age to 16. And that has passed, and so students that are 16 and older can vote in council elections, et cetera. I definitely support 17, but I definitely want to support 16. I believe that students at 16, we work in your state. You take our taxes. We deserve to vote. You have our taxes. We want to know what you do with it. So I definitely support 17, but 1,000% 16.
And you know what's crazy? I've been, for the past 7 months, I've been organizing a student gun violence summit that was in DC Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the summit went very well, and these were kids from all around the nation. And it's funny because that same thing came up, and this girl was like, what if we were able to vote at 16? And everybody was like, girl, are you crazy? And then we all just sat down for like a good 5 more seconds. We were like, that makes sense. And then, and the same exact thing that you said, like if we're working, we're paying taxes. I get a water bottle for $1, it's $1.06. Like, so we're paying taxes, so we should have a right to vote. And honestly, if we do have, if we bring back civics, if we do like voting, like class president, class vice president, when we did that and, not everybody wins, at a young age till now, then yes, we will have a more educated 16, 17, and 18-year-old. I think we're very smart. This is a smart panel. So yes, I wish we were able to vote.
Absolutely, I want to echo those thoughts because I agree 100% everything that's going on here. Especially because I think that last point, that if we lower the voting age, that'll increase motivation to educate young people about their civic duties and their civic rights, and that's absolutely important for us to understand. Everybody's telling us like you need to understand what it's like in the real world. We are in the real world. This is the real world. We experience it every day, and it's yes, we are young people and we have our times that we're not focused and serious, but we see everything that goes on around us and we're aware of our surroundings, and if we're educated about how to make decisions in our own communities, then we can get further and further.
Thank you. I want to thank all of you. My hashtag has been "They're coming for us." As a board president in Toledo, Ohio, I'm very intrigued with the board seats that some of you hold, and particularly the whole notion of student voice. If anybody can talk about some kind of backing up a few steps to those student voice initiatives in any of your schools or districts, and specifically how you capture the voices of not only the superstars and the gifted students such as all of you, but how do you spread the voice around to make sure that students that aren't likely to be engaged in things like the typical leadership paths and the typical paths that we think of when we assign students to these sorts of panels. Share a little bit about that with us. We're looking at student voice actively in Toledo, and I would really love to find a way to make a meaningful seat, not just a token seat on shared governance with our students in Toledo someday. So thank you for that.
If I could quickly respond to that. My biggest concern, I think, as a student and also as a citizen in the United States is that we're hearing too much from the people that I think have it all. I want to listen more to the people that are at the very bottom of the social ladder. And I think what's very concerning is there's a very large population in the United States that we're forgetting about. And frankly, I think we're seeing it in our schools, especially our urban schools. And so I think that what's important is is that each of us, especially those that come from a place of privilege, that we're extending a hand to those that feel that they don't have a voice. And again, that we're stressing that no matter who you are, where you come from, your background, the income that your parents make, I want to hear your perspective because your perspective is valid. And I think that we can truly achieve greatness and prosperity for all of us the moment we start listening to all of us.
And I also, something that I do want to talk about too is the school board is such an important job. It really is. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my school board member, Dr. Osgood. I talked to her, and I remember after the march, I was still very, March for Our Lives, and I was so pumped up about it. And I came back and I said, I have something to say. Like, I'm ready to speak out and talk about like the bigger issue. And she helped me have a press conference, and I press releases, like what is that? And we had the press conference. We had like over like 12 media coverage that came. Then we had like a meeting called Storm, which I'm the founder of, Students Tactfully Organizing Revolutionary Movements. It's a mouthful. And we talked about all of the groups that came out of Stoneman Douglas and see where our head is at and what do we push for. After that, one of our students from Storm said that he wants to do, like, he helped the vote when it comes to the school board, and he reached out to Dr. Osgood and said, you know what, after the wake of Stoneman Douglas, we got so much security, which you could see which people may feel secure, but for Black students, no. More police presence, and he said, you know what, I came down to campus, and Black people tend to look more mature than they are, and he changed his stance and put his hand by his waist where his gun is, and stared at him and also a friend of that's also part of Storm while he walked into the school and gave him a weird look, making sure that he was even a student. And telling Dr. Osgood this, which is a school board member, she was able to vote based on that experience. Dr. Osgood is not a part of my school's district at all, but as the only Black school board member, she understood the cadence of that. While you may think, oh, more police presence will be good at Stoneman Douglas, speaking with students that that are there, she was able to vote correctly. You understand? Yes. So the values of students and school board, and I'm also now part of the diversity committee from the Broward School Board, and being a part of, talking about policies, and they weren't even talking about gun violence, they were talking about reassignments, and I am myself a reassigned student to Stoneman Douglas. I do not live in the Parkland area. I was able to talk about how a friend that lives across the street from me was kicked out of Stoneman Douglas because it was too big, and we were able to talk about, are you bringing Black and brown kids to more affluent schools, and then when it gets too big, kick them out, and will it just turn into a big circle? So opening that conversation up. So I think it's very important to also allow them to vote. I was able to vote at that meeting. That was really cool. So yes.
I would.
Go ahead.
I don't know who should speak.
Okay. I know it's been a while. It's like 3 questions since I talked, but basically, there's a lot of things in my school there's a lot of administrators that try to run the school to the best of their ability, but they can't keep everybody and every student intact for so long. And I feel like the students feel upset and they feel discouraged, they feel angry because it's how they feel like the school is ran doesn't give any fairness to them. They feel like because we, possibly because of dress code, possibly because, they feel like school is the only place that can give them serenity. Like they can't go home because they're afraid to be by themselves, or they can't go home because they have issues going on, or they can't go home because they're hungry, or they can't go home because they don't have a home to go to. So me having a voice for the people that are in my school, the students, for the kids that are in my school, is because I can relate to them. And it may not be the fact that I was ever, I didn't have a home, but I know what it's like to feel hungry. I know what it's like to be able to have situations going on at home where it wouldn't be necessarily right at the moment. But I just kept strong, and I believe in a saying, believe for the shoestrings before the shoes. And basically, you build faith off of that. And when you build your faith, you realize how strong and wise you become and how you can be and how to handle situations. And your situational awareness grows. And I feel like me speaking on this panel today is a huge opportunity and a blessing because I can speak for the students who can't speak upon their situational awareness, who can't have a voice for themselves, who can't speak for every other kid that they see that's just like them. So the order that's surrounding the school, I feel like advocating for it, I can develop it, make it better somehow. So.
I would add to that that students are the main stakeholders in their own education.
Yes.
And having a voice on a school committee or a school board, what you will, is imperative. You need it. You need it to make your education system work. And especially having one representative is a great start. But one representative can only represent so many voices, right? From my personal experience, I'm a high school student. So my main point of view is to stand up for high school students. That's just the first thing that comes into my mind, being a high school student. Right? And I have two little sisters, so I know what the elementary system is like within BPS, so I can speak to that. But I'm missing the middle school students. And I'm trying my best to listen to them, but I need that too, right? So having one representative, great start. 2, 3, beautiful. Also, that vote, also super important, right? If a student can only do so much when they speak, and yes, I know that student voice is extremely important, and I know that you all are listening, that's why we're here, right? But me being able to actually put my opinion down on record as a vote, so much more like power in that. I'll leave you with this. Who better than the students to tell you what we need?
Let me first thank you for being here today. All of you are an inspiration. I'd love to close out all of my Fridays with a panel like this. So my question goes to some of the comments that Evelyn, you've had, and Bishop, and that is, what are some of the structures that we can change in how we organize and run schools in order to better engage students, to better meet your needs? Typically we do that from a top-down basis, or we do things because that's the way they've always been organized. But if you had to start with a blank slate, what are some of the things that all of you would like us to consider changing, modifying, and how we actually organize and run schools to better meet your needs, to make sure that all kids can be involved and engaged and inspired to the level that you are?
So in Baltimore City, we have this program, I guess. It's called 21st Century Schools. And what this do is an initiative to make new public schools, middle schools, and elementary schools so that students feel like they're there for a reason. Baltimore City has one of the oldest schools, some of the oldest schools in the country. And so this initiative is really big for Baltimore because we really feel that this is a step forward. This is a step forward to see that students, especially elementary and middle school, have a voice. And even one of the examples I would give is that we have in these 21st century schools restorative practices classrooms. And what these classrooms do are they're not typical everyday classrooms. These are classrooms that are equipped with round circles or, not even desk at all. And what does it do is students sit around in a circle and they just get to know each other. They tell about their days. They tell about their household issues if they feel comfortable. And this is a better way for the school system to get a knowledge of what we're actually dealing with. If we actually see that students are dealing with certain things at home, we can implement a all-day dinner, lunch, and breakfast menu. And so I believe that by having these restorative practices and having these 21st century schools built, it's also giving the students a sense of, a worth, I guess. It gives students the idea that, oh my God, this whole building is for me. I can do whatever I want in this building. And it's great because we see some of that. Dr. Santalisa, our CEO of schools for Baltimore City, said that one student said, is this school actually for me? Because they were in one of the buildings that were the oldest building in the city, in the country. And that, when you're coming from that to a building that has air conditioning and heating, and you can feel the heat, that's a major upgrade. And so I really think that by having restorative practices classroom, answering to your question, restorative practice classrooms and upgraded classrooms that have been, some of the classrooms still look like the 1800s classrooms, and I thought we were an evolving country. And so, don't let me get into that. But having restorative classrooms and getting to know the students so that you actually know what you're dealing with, and then you can take a step from there.
I think that, thank you for that point, by the way, and I think that in New York City, it's a really interesting situation. So we have about roughly 1.8 million public school students, and the question that I keep asking myself is, how am I supposed to represent all 1.8 million of the students that I'm with every day? And how am I supposed to fulfill even a little bit of what every student encompasses? All of their identities, all of their struggles, all of what they bring every day into their classrooms. And that's a big question, and that's something that I feel like New York City has done a really good job of looking at. The first thing that we see and that we tend to do is look at the table that we're sitting at and look at who we're missing. Find who we are missing. Because if you are trying to represent a city that's so diverse, that has so many different cultures, you can't always have the most privileged person in the room be speaking, which I think is a sentiment that we can all agree with. So something that the organization and group that I work with, the Youth Technical Assistance Center for Addressing Disproportionality, the one where we do research, look at school segregation within New York and nationally, when we started last year, we had a majority of Manhattan students, which is arguably the most privileged borough. I go to a Manhattan school. I go to the most privileged district within Manhattan. So it's really all these tiers. And during the summer, we sat down. We wondered, how are we going to represent New York if we just have 12 privileged District 2 students? How are we going to get our job done? How are we going to serve justice where it needs to be served? So we sent out applications for our work again to every single principal in New York City. Every single principal, which is a lot of people. And so we did all of the math, calculated all the representation that we needed to have from Staten Island, from the Bronx, from Brooklyn, Queens, and then Manhattan again, and we limited ourselves. We really made sure that we had enough voices from the Bronx and Staten Island, which we don't get nearly enough of when we're in Manhattan. We really recognize that if you want to hear from students, you better hear from all students.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now, right before we go to you two real quick, I just want to say, when I was writing these questions, I was concerned that we wouldn't have enough, but right now we're not even a third of the way done with the list. But keep it coming, because I love this. Okay, why don't we start with you, and then we'll go to you.
Okay, first of all, I'm so proud of you all, and I'm a former high school teacher. My name is Linda Young. I'm from Clark County School District. Been a board member for 10 years, and so high school kids rock. I want you to know that.
Thank you.
I'm a big fan of all ages of students. Here, I've got two questions for you. First of all, you're brilliant, and way back in the day, I'm from that whole civil rights group, where voting was a life or death issue. I mean, if you went in certain places and you tried to register people to vote, you could lose your life. Now, in the last election, 2016, between Hillary and, well, we won't say the other, but anyway, the young vote did not come out. They were either discouraged, and it tipped the scale in terms of the young 18, 19, those that could vote. What can you do, and what can you do to support people your age, that voting makes a difference, and that voting can change the dynamics? The vote for the presidential election was between 48 and 57%. That was presidential. And midterm is somewhere around 40%. In France, it's about 80% in some of your other countries. So we've got an issue here, not with my people. I mean, my age group, many of us, we vote no matter what, every election. But the group that you're with, and even younger coming up, what can you do to help that particular area? And then another question, think about this. How many of you had great teachers? I mean, just great teachers, great teachers. Okay, how many of you are planning on being a teacher?
In some form.
Okay, you see where I'm going with this. You see where I'm going with this. If America's gonna, I'm not gonna say that one, but if America's gonna move forward, and we do know about the money issue, it's huge, and we can turn that around. But think about that, those two things. You had great teachers, and those teachers are moving on, and now where are going to be the other great teachers if they're not going to be you? And then help me with the vote. How are we going to bring you all into the voting process?
Yeah. I'll speak on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the thought process of getting yourself ready to vote starts before it's even time to vote. When I was, I believe, in 8th grade, I was volunteering for the Hillary Clinton campaign. You can do, it doesn't matter what age you are, you can do things. I was walking house to house, passing out brochures. You can inspire people in your own community to work hard. Every single teacher that I've had has contributed in some way to raising me as a person. So Ms. Fox, who was my 8th grade government teacher, she inspired us to go out and to volunteer for the campaigns. She didn't tell us which ones, whatever one you identified with, and make a change. It doesn't matter what age you are. And getting that thought process started before you even reach the age to vote is what is really key to getting people, more people in my age group voting.
Yeah. Oh.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
And what was surprising was when I was volunteering, most of the volunteers weren't older than me, they were younger than me. So getting more people, it starts before you get to that age. It starts by getting involved and like just having people around you who inspire you to make a change like that.
Yeah. I was talking to someone earlier, he's actually in the room right there. 18 to 24 age range, some of the 16, 17 age range, some of the students that are youth that have grown up during that time were experiencing an economic downfall. And so what I think I see here is that I see a distrust in our government, and I think that the youth through 18 to 24 do not believe in our government. And there are actually reasons why to not believe in our government, with the Russia scandal and every other scandal that's in the book. But I think it's just by getting youth out there, 18 to 24, it's just the matter of getting them to trust the government again. If we can see that if you actually vote, it matters, and if you tell them that you can actually have an impact, and if you were to vote in the 2016 election, the outcome could have been different, I think that you will get more of a reasonable conversation with the youth to actually tell them the reasons why. And I think by you saying that, you can change their perspective and say, hey, I know we've done all this, but look at it now. We have such and such in office, and then we have, we could have made a change, but I think that this 2020 presidential election that is coming up, youth need to know, and it's our responsibility up here and the other youth on this live stream to know that you can actually make a difference. And by us being allowed to vote here, we're going to make a change. We're going to vote because we know the impact it can have. And so I think it's just the trust in the government between the 18 to 24 age range. Yeah.
I also think something that's helped me get politically involved is my mom adopted me when she was 50, so I was involved with that 70-year-old age group. All my cousins are like 40 and over. Like, my whole life has been like, how's your retirement fund going? How are the kids? Like not gonna lie, that's been my whole life. So, like, just being surrounded by those people, they are already politically active, and I've been involved in that community who is politically active. So just by being involved with those people who are that age group, who do care about voting and did go to the polls, I feel like I can go to the polls. So if we do more inter-age group mixing, we're gonna have more people voting.
And if I can offer some input on this question as final answer, I think another thing that's very, very concerning is people don't know about the issues, I think especially at a very young age. I remember during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, one thing that I personally enjoyed doing was I'd reach out to my friends that are in the conservative club at my school and then friends that are in the Democrat club at my school, and I'd ask them, what are your thoughts on what's going on? And I was hearing a lot of response there, obviously, because they were very, very engaged. But unfortunately, I think both of those clubs don't have, in comparison to the rest of my school's population, they don't have a ton of participants. And I remember I was in one class the Monday after he was confirmed, and I was talking to someone who's literally one of the smartest people I know. I mean, he gets an A+ on every test. And I said, so what do you think about the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation? And he literally said, who's Brett Kavanaugh? And so that's what's really important here, is that I think students in general in school are just so busy with extracurricular activities and studies and just so many different things, they don't have time to go on CNN or Fox or, just learn about any of the basic issues. And that's why, on a personal note, one of the things I try to do with my own organization is to host these kinds of workshops that are going to teach kids, here's what's going on in economics, here's what's going on with immigration. Don't tell them what side to pick, tell them about both sides, and then let them do it. Because I think what's very concerning is we let media or other people tell us how to vote. And I think that especially as youth, we've kind of had enough of that, and now we're starting to broaden our horizons. But at the same time, part of the reason why only 26% of us are voting is because the other 74%, it's not that they don't care, it's just that they don't know. And I think that that's what's really incumbent upon teachers, where while we're learning about math or English or anything else, which we are going to use later on in life, we also need to be applying a thing that we're going to be using most. And those are the issues that are going to affect us, whether it's tuition, whether it's housing, so many things that are on the table. And so, to the teachers in here, I encourage you, even for 5 or 10 minutes every day leading up to the midterms, which I believe now are in 12 days, just take the time to talk about one issue. Don't say your stance on it. Tell people about both sides, and then encourage them, especially if they are of voting age, to then go out and let themselves be heard. Because I think that's what's most important right now. Go ahead.
My name is Darrell Wu. I'm Sacramento City Unified School Board. I want to congratulate all of you. We too have a student board member. The United States is a representative government. Our Declaration of Independence begins with "We the people." Our student board member is elected by the representatives of the student council. We ask that student representative, that student board member, to be the representative of all the students, and their job is to communicate with high school students, with junior high school students, just as my job as an elected official is to communicate with my constituency. There are things in this world, in the United States, that bother you. They bother me. The Brett Kavanaugh hearings, the elections, the shootings in Broward County, all of that bothers me. This body sent resolutions, each of the school boards sent resolutions to Washington, D.C., asking for reasonable gun control. We still haven't got it, have no movement on it. But you know what? We have our vote. And we should be the change we want to see. So I urge you all to get your friends and your colleagues and your age group to get out there and vote, because you will be that change. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Jonathan Garcia, Portland Public. If every single one of you had a chance to send a message to President Trump, what would it be?
That's tough.
Oh, can I go first?
I believe that we
go
all
down
feel
the
like
line.
that's a pretty tough situation to talk about, because there's a lot of things that we want to say to him, bad or other. There is no good. So I would just say he should have just stayed where he was at. That's basically it. There's nothing else you could say about it now because he is in office, and there will be a time eventually when he is out, and we will all come into that. But he should have just left this whole presidency alone. He should have stayed where he was at. He was fine and he was good, and he doesn't deserve to be in office.
I would tell Trump to read the Constitution. I think that's necessary.
I would say that he's in office right now, be able to have conversations like we're having right now. I think this is like one of the most civil conversations I've ever had with a group of students, and I think we're 10 times more civil and respectful than a lot that's going on in the administration right now and in the courts. Yeah.
I would say that being a leader means to listen and to realize that you represent so many people, whether you like them or not, or you think they're hard workers or not, it doesn't matter. You represent those people, and remember that to empathize with those people and to listen to them and to represent yourself well.
I think very simply something I would say is something that is chanted at a lot of rallies, especially in New York at Trump Tower, like almost every day. He will not divide us. You will not divide us, if I'm speaking directly to Trump. We see you, we hear you, we know what you're doing to us, and you won't divide us.
Oh gosh, I'm trying to find the most articulate way how to say this. I don't, same thing, I don't know what made him, he probably made a bet and won and to run for president. But what I do have to say is, someone that is supposed to represent the people holds such ignorance, racism, and no moral compass at all. Should have stayed right there in his little tower, because you have disrespected so many women, so many Black people, so many politicians as a whole. You have, and even some Republicans disrespected that party as well, and disrespected men as a whole as well. It's a shame. It is a crying shame, and that's why I don't have a direct statement. I'm so appalled by his presidency as a whole, because he's disrespected politics in general. That's all I have to say.
Now, we have received a lot of questions from around the country, and I want to make sure that we are getting to at least one of those. So this question is from St. Paul, and if I can have a couple of you respond to this, it is, do you think you should be a citizen to vote?
I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I feel like whether or not you vote, I feel like all people should be allowed to vote when they understand the issues and they have a dog to say in the fight, when they know what they want. My parents are from Nigeria, and even now that they're citizens, before they even became citizens, they knew and they understood who they would vote for, and they saw the issues. So anytime you have a voice, and if you're in a country that allows you to express that voice, I believe that you should be able to.
So adding on, I'm really going to connect that to DACA and everything that's happening when we're looking at undocumented youth in general, because I moved to New York City 2 years ago, but before that I was born and raised in McAllen, Texas. It's a border city. It's on the border of Mexico. The Time magazine cover of the little girl reaching for her mother's dress, that's my hometown. The place where we see students and children and their mothers and fathers and just relatives in general in places, ICE detention centers that resemble cages, that's my hometown. That's my hometown, but that's not me. So imagine for the students, for the people, for everyone that is in that situation, the way that they must be living is just so much more magnified, because I remember growing up, and every time we would drive, well, Texas, huge state, so basically it would take hours to drive, and you would always go past these border checkpoints, and they would, of course, ask if you're a citizen, ask to see your papers, ask what you're doing, where you're going, why you're there, like a whole interrogation. And I remember on certain buses, maybe on school trips, maybe to just travel in general, there would always be a person that would get called off the bus and not get called back on. And what are you supposed to do when you're in your classroom and you are suffering the same things as these other students, and they are living a very similar life to you, but they're going back and forth between the border, or they're completely away from their family in general? They are living in the same America as you. They are living the same reality as you. They are suffering from the same trauma and same classroom regulations and same school system and same government as you, but they don't have the right to do anything about it. What are you supposed to do then? Where is all the rah-rah over voting then? Because in this conversation, we've been talking so much about voting, but we have been neglecting such a huge part of our country, and that is our undocumented people in general. Because them being viewed as quote-unquote illegal aliens strips them of their very humanity just when we speak about them. Because one, they can't be illegal on stolen land, and two, they're still human. So I can't even speak. So after all of that, after seeing all of that, after being put through an administration that doesn't even recognize their basic humanity, I think the very least we can do is give them the right to vote in the country that they belong to and that they give so much benefit to, because immigrants make up America. My mom, my dad, they make up America. Everyone in this room that comes from immigrants, everyone that is an immigrant, you make up America. And so the question was also recognizing the live stream and that there are undocumented students. We see you. You are important to us. We need you. You help us. This isn't just our country, this is yours too.
Wonderful. Does anyone else want to speak to that?
Yeah, just to get this off my chest. So the other day I was watching YouTube, and I was watching Jimmy Kimmel, you know, the comedian, stuff like that. But basically, he mentioned something about getting serious, and he mentioned something about DACA. And it was a scenario where they would have people who opposed that, and they expressed how they felt about immigrants that are illegal need to go back, and they need to get a passport to come here legally, just like everybody else would. So he showed a scenario where it was this man that was from the U.S., and he was married to an illegal immigrant, and she had a baby. And what they told him, Jimmy Kimmel, was that the man can stay, because he served his country. And the baby should stay because she doesn't know what's going on. She's not fully developed yet. But the mother should go. And she should go back to her homeland and come back here legally. When I saw it the other day, just going through what DACA was, I thought it was very wrong. And the first thing that popped up in my head was, you can take a person that's an illegal immigrant and you can chop their head off about how they're not supposed to be here and deport them all the way back to their homeland when they're trying to make something better, when they're the ones that are trying to make America great again. And they're looking for true jobs, true education to help develop their families and even take it back to their homeland. But you won't worry about the crime rates. You won't worry about the killings. You won't worry about the people who get away every day with raping and killing and murdering and stealing and robbing and harming other people. How does that look? That's all I have to ask.
So now that we have around 5 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we hear from each of you. And if we can have, maybe one person respond to each question so we can make sure that we can get through all of them, and then I'll have a brief closing before we conclude. So please begin.
Thank you for inspiring us to continue elevating your voices and making sure that you are successful at everything you're dreaming of doing. There was one thing that I want to challenge you to consider, because I heard you say the difference between what you are able to do today and what we were able to do when we stopped a war in the 60s was that we had a cause to unite around. It wasn't just the war that we united around, but that our generation was old enough to fight in the war, but not old enough to vote. So we fought to lower the voting age from 21 to 18 around that war. But I quickly jotted down when I heard that, how are you not uniting around what Lily expressed so eloquently, the environmental issues? You're going to be on this planet longer than we are. Affordable college, affordable health care, the opioid crisis that is killing so many people your age, minimum wage. I could work a minimum wage job in the 60s and pay for my entire year of college, room and board included. And I had the time when I got there to do the thinking and the dreaming and to act as the conscience of America, which college kids can't today, strapped with tuition debt and credit card debt. I think you have a lot of issues to unite around, and I'm so anxious to hear about more of them.
I think the reason we don't unite around many of these issues is because we don't have the tools to know how to start that. That's why we are here today, to tell students how to unite around these issues and how to get involved. And some things that I think make students who do come from unprivileged backgrounds and poverty, they don't have a motivational figure to push them to get involved in voting, to get involved in just making themselves successful and being the best they can be. I think like a school provides that opportunity and provides that platform. My school, Cleveland School of Science and Medicine, we have opportunities to celebrate individual students and to encourage those who are not celebrated individually. So everybody is still celebrated and encouraged to be their best. And I think if people are given that opportunity through school to understand what types of issues they can make a difference on, what type of issues the whole entire school body can unite on, then they know where to go and how to start. But we just don't know how to equip those students with tools, and we don't know how to get them, I think, is the main issue. We need civics classes. Like, I don't have a civics class. Where's that? So, like, if I had that, I feel like all of my students, like, there's girls who are smart at my school, and they're like, oh, I'm not politically active. I don't really care about politics. I'm like, but why? Oh, I don't know. Well, let's talk about Cardi B. Like, I'm like, no, let's talk about voting. Let's talk about, this stuff. It's not a forefront in their mind. They are more focused on themselves, more focused on other things. You have to use school and celebrating students for when they do make these accomplishments politically and trying to encourage them to get out there to really get them to unite on these issues is what I would say.
All right. Oh, if I can add, I know we have one person per question, but going back to what you said about, healthcare, education, college specifically, working. Speaking specifically for African Americans, sometimes we don't even get to have, college. We don't even make it that far. Most drop out of high school. We sometimes don't even get a job because we dropped out of high school and we didn't get an education. And so what I think it's really is for is that having the tools to unite us together, but also having an actual common ground. I know that there may be a lot of people that go to college, there may be a lot of people that have jobs, but we have to think about the overall impact, the entire country. We need to talk about things like gun control because everyone is experiencing that. We need to talk about things like the opioid addiction because everyone is experiencing that. And I definitely think that the opioid addiction and gun violence are things that we can unite as a whole together and unify, and because we all have experienced some type of gun control or some type of opioid, or we know a friend that's been, dealing with opioid issues for a matter of time. And I just think finding the common ground and finding an actual collaborative thing that matters to all is what we can actually accomplish and actually unify and have another civic war.
Again, I want to reiterate, thank you so much. I'm so glad you all were here, and we hear you. We hear your voice, and thank you for sharing it with us. I would like to know a little bit more on the area we've talked about, gun control, but something that we can do something about as school board, school administrators. I'd like to talk a little closer to home about school safety. So, because I'm from the Houston area and we had the Santa Fe shootings, so it too has affected our lives. How do we make our schools safer? Because we've got some people on one side that are saying we need the metal detectors, we need police officers, we need a stronger police presence in our schools. Others are saying, and politicians in my state, are saying we need to give all the teachers guns. How do we make our schools safe when we don't want them to be prisons? And I also don't think teachers should all have guns in their classrooms. What can we do?
I feel like, the feeling of it being like a prison is a mindset. I feel like if somebody is truly under danger and there's a shooting about to happen, or there's a invader that's coming inside of your school, you're not going to see those metal detectors and those cops as a prison. So I feel like that's a mindset. I feel like giving teachers firearms is unnecessary to do. I feel like, just the metal detectors, the security guards is fine because, it brings more of a secure feeling of somebody who has that badge, who has the actual credentials to be a security guard, to have a weapon than a teacher that just, they're illegal to have a weapon, but they don't have the credentials to be a security guard. So that's just how I feel about that. I feel like it's just a mindset that people have. They're coming up with ways to say new things about how new rules and new laws should be handled by the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, but I feel like it's just it's something like a fad, something to talk about.
I would like to politely, completely disagree. In the research that we've looked at, and especially in the New York City Department of Education, we see that metal detectors and scanning schools are one of the biggest topics that we have to be talking about, because it all starts with thinking about the school-to-prison pipeline, prison industrial complex, and sorry, I got distracted. Okay, sorry. And recognizing that if you want to stop the school-to-prison pipeline, you have to stop criminalizing youth in the school system.
Yes.
And that is such a clear statement, because I have seen firsthand that when metal detectors are placed at predominantly black and brown schools, that's not a coincidence, that's the intention.
Yes.
Because if you have students being kicked out of the classroom, being suspended, being taken out of the room that they're supposed to be in, how can you expect them to come back? And then if you go in like a step even further and you have metal detectors and school safety agents who, by the way, are NYPD police officers who don't have any implicit bias training, who are legally allowed to carry weapons without having any type of training to teach them about their implicit bias against race or how to deal with kids in general. And then you're having students at the front of this door of this school building wondering, should I walk in? Should I be criminalized again? Should I even put myself into a situation where people are looking at me as not just a student, but as a ticking time bomb that's waiting to cause danger, that's waiting to commit crimes, that's waiting to be something other than what they actually are, a student? Because, sorry. So basically, I think that when you're looking for a problem in a place that the problem just isn't there, then you're going to find something and you're going to use that to justify a different agenda. But students are not the problem. Black and brown folk aren't the problem. When you're placing metal detectors, you're just further dehumanizing the students when you should be allowing them to speak out and to vocalize the issues that they're facing.
And something that I do want to share a quick story is after the shooting, we had a 2-week march, 2-week break, and then we returned. Tell me how I was greeted by my computer science class with a man in bulletproof vest and he was armed with an AR-15 in his hand. We had about 5 of those men walking our hallways, the same gun that killed 17 of our Eagles that I had to run from and hide from. So when we talk about public school safety, which is something I'm a huge advocate for because I was directly affected by that shooting, it's really important because I totally agree with the student to prison pipeline and militarizing our schools, which is something that I talked about straight out the gate after the shooting. It's not okay at all. Black people will continue to be racially profiled. Arming teachers is not okay. Not saying that this is something that you would do, but it will be such a short amount of time before a teacher says, I felt intimidated, and the stand your grounds law will be implicated in schools.
Yep. I have a quick comment. I have something just quick to add. If we look at the root of the problem, the people who are doing these shootings are some students who are not mentally well. They don't feel like they belong. So let's get some mental health and some mental health in the schools. Like, I have a building that has 3 schools in it, right? So it's 3 different schools, and we have 1 counselor who's there Monday, Wednesday, and who knows when. So, like, I don't know what her name is. She changes seasonally. Like, I think, like, I don't know. Like, I think they need to have a mental health, something that's going to prevent this. So, like, why deal with the after effect? Why can't we be proactive rather than reactive?
Yep. I think schools need to reevaluate, or schools and states, districts, everybody needs to reevaluate your punitive policies. What's your code of conduct? Do your students understand your code of conduct? Can they read it? My code of conduct is really complicated to read, right? And you need, let me start again. Definitely reevaluate your punitive policies. Implement restorative justice. Have conversations with your students about the traumas that they face outside of school and why they're bringing that to school and what they need to actually sit down and get their education, right? And everybody, and I agree, I think that a lot of the violence that happens within schools has to do with mental health issues that aren't being addressed. And I think that, again, on the punitive policies issue, reevaluate your zero tolerance policies. Those aren't helping anybody. Those are just pushing us out.
Yes.
Don't push us out. Keep us in. Keep us learning. Yep.
Just to add on to that, the punitive policy is definitely one of the things that we definitely, as Baltimore City District, reevaluated, because we value that students should not be suspended and that suspension outside of school adds onto the prison to school pipeline because students do not feel the need to come back to school if you're going to continuously suspend me. And so what we've done in the district is that we've done in-school suspension. And with in-school suspension, you are getting mentorship. You're still in the school, even though you're separated from your peers. You're still in the school learning, and you're still in the school getting an education. And so by everywhere in the country reevaluating that, you are opening up the door to actually having the students open up to you. Having the reason that you have in-school suspension, tell me the reason. Don't just kick me out of school just because I was fighting, or don't kick me out of school just because I threw a milk across the hall. Don't do those things. Keep me in school to talk about the things that I've been dealing with, and then that can lead on to mentorship. That can lead on to getting to your school counselor. That can lead on to you actually staying in school and dismantling the school-to-prison pipeline, because that is the thing that we are here to do. We're here to provide a better education for youth.
Yeah, just a very quick comment that we should always be empowering our students, not disenfranchising them. We have to stay away from that, and we always have to remember that more guns has never been the solution to any problem.
Thank you.
Yes, Fez, you had mentioned earlier about how important it is for our students to learn about issues and to hear about both sides of issues. My deepest concern in the world that we live in today is that adults can't tell the difference between what's factual and what's fake with the advent of social media. And so in our district, we're really looking at how to educate students about credible and reliable sources. At what age do you think it should begin, and how do you think it should be integrated into the curriculum?
Well, personally, I began really diving into what both sides have to offer this summer. And the reason is because I was studying for my SAT US history test, which I was supposed to take in September. And so, I dove into the history of supply side economics versus Keynesian economics, and to see, throughout American history, which one has been more sustainable if you look at it from a fiscal standpoint. And I've looked at social issues, and I've seen what strategies or tactics tend to be best in order to create change. And I think that what's unfortunate is a lot of us aren't looking back on our history. There are many, many people that have said if you don't look back on your history, you're doomed to make the same mistake again and again and again. And what's concerning is a lot of the trends that I'm seeing today in most different issues, they happened, even 20, 30 years ago, but no one's remembering because we're not looking back. And so I would recommend, as early as possible, I'd recommend reading back on just the history of both sides, because don't look at both sides in today's context. You need to look at how they've changed over time, because obviously the Democratic Party of today is very different from the Jacksonian Democrats of the mid-19th century, and the Republican Party of today is very different from the party of Lincoln back in the 1850s and 60s. And so I think that when we examine those kinds of changes, the older we get, the older students get, I think they're going to be better equipped to understand, continuities and changes over time. But I think that as long as we can provide them with the basic understanding versus telling them this party's good, this party's bad, I think that's the best thing we can do. So as early as possible is like the short answer. But as students get older, especially as they enter high school, I'd strongly suggest offering curriculums that are empowering them to look back on history from a much deeper standpoint, personally.
Adding on to Fez with that, I think that we should also be looking at how deeply flawed our curriculum is in the first place, especially in terms of anything to do with race, anything to do with class, and just basically the way that we are forcing our students to view our history. Because I completely know that my fourth grade history textbook was not the truth. And I know that my AP US history textbook right now is not the truth. But how many other students know that? Because when you're force-feeding students in a classroom every single day, in their tests, in their assignments, in their homework, in everything that it's just also deeply ingrained, the ideals of the white savior complex, the ideals of certain ways that we're telling our history. Because you can't just include one person of color in a textbook and then say that that's inclusive, because you can't just completely ignore the entire trans community or any of the LGBTQ plus community or anybody that isn't able-bodied or anybody that doesn't come from a white, wealthy, any type of standpoint, because we have been force-fed these things. We have been indoctrinated these things since we were in kindergarten. So instead of trying to fix things in high school, recognizing that things should just be fixed all around from when we start school.
Yeah, and adding on to that, you know, John Green, who's very, very famous in the education world, you know, in the first episode of Crash Course U.S. History, which again I was using to study for the AP U.S. History test and also for the SAT test, you know, he said it's very important that not only when we are looking at historical documents, but also textbooks to see, first of all, who is being left out of these books, who's being left out of history, and more importantly, who's the one that's writing these books. Because a lot of times when you remember the perspective that is looking upon history, a lot of times there may be a lot of cause for reason to maybe leave some people out. And that's actually where it's incumbent upon not just teachers, but the students to make an effort to go and read about those silenced groups, the people that no one's talking about. Because again, when we silence people in the past, we're doomed to do it again in the future. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Nina Sen from Oakland Unified and a restorative justice practitioner. I really appreciate a number of you talking about restorative justice. I also just want to say that you've set an extraordinarily high bar for the adults who are doing panels. You have been, you're wise beyond your years, and you give me a tremendous, and I know probably everyone in this room, a tremendous amount of hope for our future. Just a couple things I wanted just to mention and also ask. I really appreciated also the comments around unifying and finding common ground and staying in conversation even when it's difficult. You mentioned, is it Fez? You mentioned at the beginning about having conversations with your friends in different clubs who have different opinions. And I think that's very powerful because you sounded like you went in without judgment. You were curious. I think that's going to go far. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we had talked, there's questions by some of the adults around your engagement and how to inspire other students to vote. And I just, by a show of hands, I want to ask the adults to raise their hands if they're an elected official. I would imagine, thank you so much, I would imagine that, I'll just be frank, I won by 500 votes. Probably in any one of your high schools, you could have changed the outcome of my election. So think about that. Think about what you can do on a local level. It's powerful. These are rules that are being, that the school boards, and by the way, we have 2 student board directors, and they do have preferential voting. We need to talk about whether, take it to the next level, but it's a start. But I just really wanted to leave with you how incredibly impactful and powerful you are, and to really encourage you to continue to use your voice. And thank you so much for sharing that with us today. And I also just wanted to ask, because unfortunately I would have loved to have seen my students on the panel with you, and I have a feeling that they're some of the ones writing in. I would love to know how many students wrote in with questions, and if those could be distributed to the attendees and to all of you so we could hear what the other students are saying, even though I think that what you all have shared and the questions that you've answered are very comprehensive. Thank you.
Yeah, so in case everybody didn't hear, we don't have the specific number, but we're going to work on trying to make that available. But based off the questions actually that I received here, there are a lot that I got. A lot of these are actually the same ones as the questions we didn't get to, and that's something that actually makes me very hopeful that a lot of students have the same issues on their minds. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Fez. I'm not going to really ask my long question in the interest of time, but I just wondered in your closing comments if each of you could talk about whether you are thinking of or have considered in the future running for elected office. Just because, especially at the state and national level, personally I've been frustrated at who's on the ballot. Sometimes I don't feel like we have a real choice. And certainly I don't feel like we have our best and our brightest universally sitting in the Senate and House seats and other elected positions. So if you could give us something to say about that in your closing comments, I'd appreciate hearing it.
Well, it's weird. Okay, so I was in middle school, and I was, what was I? I was the treasurer of my Student Government Association at Guilford Elementary Middle School, and apparently everyone was like, Mr. President, and I would look, and I would like, who are you talking to? And they would be like, you, and I'd be like, why are you talking to me? I'm the treasurer. And they're like, because you do so much. And I was like, well, okay. And I just think, like, all of the Student Government Association that we all do on this panel and all of the civic engagement things that we do on this panel, such as this panel, I do think that, you know, all of us could have a future. We all in politics, and, you know, we all could be an elected official. We all could be, one of us could be the president. You never know what happens, and that's what I think the most powerful thing about voting is. And I think, you know, I want to be president one day, so that's a thing. You know, I really think that voting and getting our youth to know the power that an elected official has is one of the key things that we can do, and one of the greatest things that we can do is have more young people in our government. We often see older Caucasian men running the office, doing the things that we feel that they're not doing right. And we can change that by electing the people that we find are appropriate and electing the people that will actually support our generation rather than deteriorate it. And so I really think that students should be educated on knowing about elected officials and knowing about elections, and it all comes back to voting. At the end of the day, it comes back to voting and having your voice heard and having your opinion on certain issues. So yeah.
Something.
We're already,
Go ahead.
We're already inspired. I mean, the reason we're up here is we're already inspired by people our age and 10 times younger than us. So I think that I can say for all of us that we're already inspired to keep going in that direction. So we're up here because we want to represent all of our students and what they care about. And that should be seen more in all levels of government.
Yeah. Something we on the panel all have in common is passion. Everyone sitting here is passionate about something or various things, and I think it's important that we keep moving forward with that. And what I can say is that what I can feel is that change is coming. I have noticed there are mostly a lot of Caucasian men, people in office, and change is coming because we are empowering those who have been disenfranchised in the past. We talk about the Me Too movement, how we're working on listening to victims and empowering them. And we see people in the media talking about like, oh, I'm scared, or like, I'm scared that they're taking over. Well, if you're doing something wrong, you should be scared because change is coming. And what we're doing is correcting everything that we see wrong in our society. And that's what it is. Everyone has to be their own leader. When you see something wrong, speak up, because it's your life, it's your community. So as we keep moving forward, everyone who is passionate about what they believe in has the ability to be a leader.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately due to time, that'll be our last question. I'm very glad, though, that we ended it on an optimistic note, because I think that nowadays, when you turn on the news, it becomes really difficult for us to obviously see a positive headline. You know, looking at the front pages of newspapers and websites, one would almost think that we're living in a third world country, but obviously we're not. And on a personal perspective, you know, 2 summers ago, I took on a project to leave the urban area of Des Moines, where I live, and to venture into Iowa's most rural areas. And I remember I went to this very, very small town called Charles City. It's only a few thousand people inside it. And I remember, you know, walking into this very small diner, and I walked in and everything looked like it was out of the 50s. It was like Back to the Future almost. There was like a broken jukebox in the corner, and everyone inside was white, and you could tell they were all over the age of 60 or 70. And the mistake I made was that the night before doing this, I saw the movie Get Out. So what happened was someone stood up and she started walking over to me, and I instinctively, you know, backed up. And, you know, suddenly she put her hand out and said, "Hi, my name is Laura. Nice to meet you." And, you know, it was that experience that really showed me that what unites us is much greater than what divides us. You know, watching the news, we would think that we're the most divided people on earth, but at its core, before any of our labels, before our religion, culture, race, ethnicity, political affiliation, we're all Americans first. And I think that that's what's important to remember first and foremost at the end of the day. So on that note, I'd like to thank my fellow panelists and above all, the parents and teachers that have uplifted us to get over here. Thank you.